Get down.
This meeting is being recorded.
Here we go. Okay, all the resources that we're using today will be in the Padlet. So the link was sent to you and Nick will be putting it in the chat as well. So any resources that you may need to access or want to access should be located there. And there may be more things that we'll add as we go. There's also a QR code that you can access it through your phone if you'd like to do that quickly. But make sure you have access to the Padlet. So we have linked a few resources there that we're going to be talking about today. We have a guest with us today. We've got Rachel Wakefield from ODE. She is amazing with data and has a great way of telling a story. So I'm really excited that she had the time available and the willingness to come and talk to us about the new report card and especially the early literacy markers on that. We're going to talk about dyslexia in regards to PD requirements and gaining that certification requirement that you need to have a person certified. So we're going to be brainstorming a little bit in that topic. And we're also going to be looking briefly at the new third grade reading guarantee guidance document and what are what's a kind of a crosswalk and what were the changes made to the book this year. So those will be our topics. Hopefully you brought a lot of your questions about the new report card because Rachel is the person to ask. So please feel free to ask questions. You can unmute and ask a question as she's presenting, or you can put it in the chat and then one of us, either Nick or I, will ask the question for you. But please, this is the time to ask your questions. Anything for the good of the order before we start?
Just ask if you aren't muted right now, if you could just check your microphone and mute so that we don't get any feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, Rachel, I think I gave you co-host so that you can share a screen. Is that correct?
I don't think so. It says I can't share right now.
Okay.
I can try again.
Go back. Oops. What about now?
Yes, I can now.
Perfect.
Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Yes, I'm seeing a chat shake. Okay, yes. So I'm Rachel Wakefield. I am really excited to be here. I'm SST1 in that region. I just like a lot. I'm a University of Toledo and BGSU alum. So we actually still own a rental house up in Sylvania, even though we live in Marietta, Ohio now, which I did not know existed until I went there. So it's right there by West Virginia, around 4.5 hours from the Toledo area. But I'm here today to talk about the early literacy component on the report card, but specifically like really the measurement of it and then also what the data can tell you and how to use it. And I love questions. Feel free to interrupt at any time for clarifications and we'll get started. So let me make sure I can. Okay, so just some overall general things about the report card. There are kind of two documents that I really love. And the very first is this overview guide to the school report cards. And I like it because it's just like color coded, easy, quick, very quick guidance. My next go-to though are the resources and technical documents. And also know that like this PowerPoint will be sent to you with all the links within it. So the resources and technical documents, it does take quite a while to go through and really understand. But if you have any questions about how the report cards, any of those components are calculated, they are in those technical documents. The last thing though is that there are kind of three main places to get data. The very first is the report card page. And then if you click kind of those lines there, it will show you that they have these advanced reports, the portal, and then this download data. And both of those things I use for different analysis. Like, okay, let me look at all these different buildings together. I would like to use download data. If I want longitudinal data, I would do this advanced reports. This advanced report portal looks very, very similar to what you see in the secure data center. So as a quick side note, it's come to my attention that a lot of people don't realize what's in the secure data center and the information that's available. And then the people who are in the districts who really could use the data from the secure data center don't often have access because nobody knows that they need it or that they should have it. So if you have questions about this later, let me know because I cannot tell you how great the secure data center is once you know how to use it and who in the district should have it. So really, they're kind of like the way that I like to look at data kind of goes in three different steps. So first, here's what. So here's the data. And then so what? So what does this data tell us? And then I find that a lot of times maybe we get stuck in those two things. So one of the most important things is now what? Now what do we do with it? Where do we go from here? So really looking first at so what? And also now what, like what, not now what, but what does the data tell us? The early literacy component is now made up of three different things. The very first thing, actually, hold on a second. So when you go on the report card page, you'll see this percentage here, and this percentage matches up to a star rating. There are different weights. And so this is really important to kind of know because kind of want to take a step back here. So in a traditional K-3 building or K-5 building, you're going to have three different measures. The first measure is proficiency in third grade reading, and we'll get into that in a second, but that is weighted at 40%. Then the promotion to fourth grade, so how many third graders, were able to be promoted to fourth grade, that's weighted at 35%. And then this improving K-3 literacy, and sorry, I can see that I kind of need to move this up a little bit to align it better, but this improving K-3 literacy is worth 25%. Now, here's the thing that I want everyone to be careful about, is that sometimes, we might immediately look at star ratings and think that a district is doing amazing or a district is doing very poorly, depending on their star rating. And I want you to be very careful about doing that. And the reason is that almost always this improving K-3 literacy is this lowest percentile rank. Now, let's say you have a K-2 building. So my youngest son is in second grade and he attends a K-2 building. That means that a K-2 building, they don't have a proficiency in third grade reading score. They don't have any third graders. They don't have a promotion to fourth grade because they don't have any third graders. That means for a K-2 building, 100% of their early literacy component is based off of this improving K-3 literacy. So when the report cards came out and my son's school, I can't even remember, it was a 1 or 2 star, I can't even remember. I immediately texted the teacher and said, please do not take this personally. I know you guys are doing so many things. You are doing a phenomenal job. There are not many K-2 schools in Ohio, but those schools who are, they really are heavily impacted by this. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Also, unlike in the past, where pretty much the entire grade was based on this K-3 literacy, note that if you are a K-3 or K-5 building, this is only at 25% of your grade now. And so it is the smallest percentage. So I'm going to talk about that. But if you're looking at really increasing your star rating, there are many more areas that you might want to focus on. So the first thing in terms of proficiency in third grade, and what does that mean? So again, this is 40% of the component. And when you go on that report card page, you're going to see this table here, and you'll see how many third graders scored proficient on the reading segment. What this means is the percent of third graders with a reading score of 50 or higher on the ELA state test. So it's not that kind of promotion score. It's not the whole ELA test in general. It is a reading score of 50 or higher. That's where this number comes from. And again, this is 40% of the component. It's huge. This is a very big deal. So the next one is the one that is 35% of the component. That is the promotion to fourth grade. And that's how many third graders met that third grade reading guarantee requirement. And typically that for most districts, you know, that's really typically 100%. There are some that are not like that, you know, and we can talk about that more if you want to, but I'm going to kind of keep on going. But again, please unmute if you have any questions when I'm going through this. And the last one, this is 25% of the component. And this is the one that I think that people spend their most energy looking at and trying to understand. And so I'm going to go through what this means, how this is calculated. And I encourage you, you know, it took me quite a few times reading that technical document to really kind of grasp and understand. So if I'm going too fast, take some time and really look at it, and feel free to email our office at any time with questions. So when you go into details of measure, you'll see this thing that says year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And what this means is that we're looking at year 1 looks at the kindergarten diagnostic of fall 2020 to the first grade diagnostic of fall 2021. Year 2 is that first grade diagnostic fall 2020 to second grade diagnostic fall 2021. And so on and so on. Stephanie, great question in terms of if they're 3-5, what are the percentages of proficiency and promotion if they have no K-3? That's in our technical document. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure it's a 60-40 split, but don't quote me on that. I'll double check in the technical document to see, but there would be nothing with that improving K-3 literacy, but I'm going to double check that to get that to you. So I'm kind of going to talk about this a different way though, because to explain this a little bit better, okay? So year 1 specifically is of the kindergarten students who scored off track on the fall 2020 diagnostic, what percent moved on track on the fall 2021 diagnostic? So I like to put this in perspective. I said that my son is a second grader, okay? Second grade right now. He was in kindergarten in the fall of 2020. So if my son scored off track in the fall of 2020, this measure is looking at when he took that diagnostic, when he was in first grade in the fall of 21, did he move on track or did he stay off track? So I hear when like people are looking at this, I hear, why is ODE using old data? This seems to be like, my son's in 2nd grade. Why are we looking at from when he was in kindergarten if he was off track, if he went on track when he was in 1st grade? So the big thing is we are looking at fall to fall data. And so this means that our report card comes out in the fall. So we couldn't use this fall 2022 data because that's when the report card was sent out to all the districts. What this also means though, is that you can essentially calculate these year 1, year 2, and year 3, because you have that fall 2020 diagnostic information and you already have the fall 2022 diagnostic information. So year 1, kindergarten, and if they moved on track in 1st grade. Year 2 is of the 1st grade students who scored off track on the fall 2020 diagnostic, what % moved on track when they were in 2nd grade on that fall 2021 diagnostic. Then this is looking at year 3 of the 2nd grade students who moved off track, who scored off track in the fall 2020, what % moved on track. And year 4 is totally different. It just confuses this equation even more. What this is looking at is this is of the 3rd grade students who scored off track on the fall 2021, what % moved on track by scoring a 700 or higher on the ELA test in that fall, spring, or summer of 2022. So I had a question before and I thought it was a really good question. The question was, are year 3 and year 4 the same group of students? So if you want to put in the chat, yes, you think they're the same group of students, or no, you don't think they're the same group of students. Okay, so we have some yes, we have some no's. The correct answer is yes, they are the same group of students. So the reason why is we're looking at the 2nd grade students who scored off track on the fall 2020. That means that they are 3rd graders in the fall 2021. So when we have those 3rd graders, year 4, it's of the 3rd grade students who scored off track on fall 2021, which ones moved on tracks? Now I could say, now that I'm saying this, is it the exact same group of students? I mean, it's the same grade level of students, but I should say I could see how some of you could say no, because you know, I guess these are, well, I won't even get into it. There's technicalities on that, but it's the same cohort of students, I should say, the same cohort of students in the 2nd and 3rd grade there. I'm not sure if I just confused you more on that, okay? But yes, same group of students. So other available data. When you click this score of on track by grade level, this chart displays the % of students scoring on track or off track on the fall 2021 diagnostic screening. And just as a side note, it kind of drives me crazy that we don't have school years like to show you guys, to show everyone on like, oh, this is fall 2021. I wouldn't have known. So know that for next year, on the next year's report card, we're trying to make changes to reflect this, to give you guys, everyone, a better idea of what year data this is showing. And for students who meet the 3rd group but do not score 700, should we be testing them? You know, that's up to you guys. Know that if they don't earn that 700, they won't be considered on track according to this measure. Now, that being said, I want to emphasize again, this is 25% of the component. This one over here with right here of a 50 or higher is 50%, or not 50, 40% of the component. So I think it's kind of like I can't say what to do or not to do, but I think that's just something that's a very good point that you make though. Like, okay, do you want to retest them or not? Okay, so this chart shows the on track by grade level on fall 2021. So that means that if we're looking at next year's improving K-3 literacy calculation, it will be of the 39.3% of kindergarten students who scored not on track in fall 2021, what percent of these 39.3 students moved on track on the fall 2022? And Carol, I'm going to come back to you with that question because I'm going to get back to you on that question because we're going to talk a little bit about that. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. So of year 2, this is of the 36.1% of students who scored not on track. What percent of these students moved on track when they took it in the fall 2022? So this past fall. So this, before I go on to what I love to do, which is the data analysis of all of this and how do we interpret this, what do we do with it, please know that it took me, like I had to write this down many times. I had to double check. I had to look at data, like my own data and see. And so you might need to review this a few times to really, really let it sink in. Also know that these are for students who are there for that full academic year. So we're not talking about move-ins, what's happening, this is, they have been with you this entire time. Dorothy, we always take the highest score. So no matter what, it's always taking the highest score. So the interpretation applications like this, now what? So there's a few things that I'd like to kind of pull to your attention. So in Ohio, there's local control in terms of the screeners that are used. And so that's another thing that I want you to be aware of when we're looking at this, because not all screeners are created equal. And so in my mind, if I'm a district, I want a screener that's valid and reliable and that really gives me a good idea of how my students are going to be performing on that state assessment. And so for here, we're looking at this on track by grade level. This is the tab here. And I see that in third grade, that third grade diagnostic, and this is that fall of 2021, that 36.5% of third graders that our screeners said were on track to score proficient on that third, I don't say score proficient, but they're on track with literacy. And then when you look at this, how many ended up scoring proficient on that reading segment of the ELA test? That's pretty darn close. That's exactly the same actually, okay? So to me, I would say, hey, this is a pretty valid screener. It really kind of looked at what we were doing. So if this number, let's say even if this number is 50 or 60%, that's great because we kind of thought that we only had 36.5% of students on track, but we worked really hard. We did a ton of interventions, and now we have many more students scoring on track. That is okay. What I get really concerned about is when I see this. And I see this more often than I think I should see this. So in this district, they had 96.7% of their third graders showing that they were on track for the third grade diagnostic. And yet only 80% ended up scoring proficient on that ELA assessment. And so I think to myself, okay, is this kind of an issue with the validity of the screener? Did somehow things just fall apart in third grade? Like, are really kids kind of moving backwards? What's happening here? But the whole point of the screener is to give you information to make changes. Like, so I'd encourage you to look at this and say, does our screener align with what we're seeing? Okay. So another thing that I love about this early literacy measure is that it really gives an idea of where we're at with tier 1 or core instruction and also intervention. So I'm going to talk first about tier 1. So this on track by grade level tab, I love it because to me, my immediate thought is this is core. This gives us an idea of where we're at with our core instruction. This is K through 3 screener information. Are we at 80% or higher proficient or on track at each grade level diagnostic? If not, then let's examine causes, possible causes. So I also, though, want to caution you guys because sometimes, the immediate thought is, oh, first grade must be doing great, and second grade, and third grade, they're probably struggling. But remember, this is fall diagnostic. And so really what we're seeing here is that the kindergarten diagnostic, this is really a reflection of what's going on with preschool or what's going on with the students who are coming into your district, how their parents are working with them, what services, what are they doing there? So this first grade diagnostic, because it's in the fall, is really a reflection of that core kindergarten instruction. Second grade is really a reflection of that core first grade instruction. Now, always with the caveat, I realize that there are certain screeners who all of a sudden, when you get in second grade, they seem to change completely. And so you might see a drop. So again, it's always careful. You need to be careful about this. But no matter what, if I am not at 80% or higher on each of these things, then there's a few things that I want to look at. This is talking about what I just said. So the very first thing that I want to look at is actually not even related to reading. I want to actually first look at the chronic absenteeism rate. And so I have a lot of districts that talk to me and they say, we don't have an attendance problem. We have like 95% daily attendance rate. I know we don't have an attendance problem. I don't care about daily attendance rate. It really doesn't, that number doesn't tell me much. What number does tell me a lot is the chronic absenteeism rate. This infographic is from Attendance Works. If you haven't looked at that website, it's great. But they did some study in California, and I'd like to highlight this, that of the kids who were chronically absent in kindergarten and first grade, chronically absent is you're missing more than 10% of school in a school year. That's around 18 days or more in a school year. So of the kids who were chronically absent in kindergarten and first grade, only 17% were able to read on grade level. That is devastating. Of the kids with good attendance, that means they missed 9 or fewer days both years, 64% were able to read on grade level. If you don't have kids coming to school, they can't learn. So you then don't know, do I have a curriculum issue? Do I have an instruction issue? Or is this really a chronic absenteeism issue? So where you can quickly find your chronic absenteeism rate is on that report card. If you go to the gap closing, it's the gap closing component, you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your page, you'll see this and it says chronic absent. This, in this particular case, there were 49.8% of students who were chronically absent. That means almost half of their kids were missing more than 18 days in a school year. That is so big. And so Again, I want you to really look at kind of the whole issue when we're thinking about this. There are some great reports that can be run in terms of, okay, who are my kids who are at risk for being chronically absent? What supports can I provide them? What's going on? So again, very first thing I look, chronic absenteeism, right? Because we don't want to spend all our time and energy improving something if we're not even getting our kids to school. So then the next three things that I look at are a few things. If you haven't looked at Ohio Materials Matters reviews, can you filter for that to see the effect, Megan? Oh, great question. So then we're running by next fall, I would say. So there's going to be a credential that's coming out that's going to be available for regional data leads, but also others, because we really want to make sure anyone can take it. And we're going to look at really this chronic absenteeism and attendance data. So there are some kind of really great data tables that can be run with your own data, let's look at MAP scores or STAR scores or iReady or Acadians, and let's compare that with their attendance. And it is eye-opening to see the difference and to see the impact that it has. So I'll make sure to keep you posted. And Megan, also, if you just want to send an email to me, I'll see if I can forward you to someone to connect you to kind of look at that a little bit more. So did I say 18 days is chronically absent? Is technically 10% or more of school. So it's, in my mind, it's a lot easier to go by days than by percentages, since we have 186 days around in a school year, or 180, I can never remember. That equates to around 18 days a school year. So there's also some really, really strong information and data that looks at, this is for next fall, of students who've missed 4 days in the first 2 months of school. They kind of can be extra hey, we really need to keep track and see and give them extra supports. But there's definitely, so it's around 18 days, if that helps. Quick side note on this. This does not take into account excused absences. It accounts for all absences. You can send in doctor's notes, it doesn't matter, because you're still missing school. So this is different from truancy. And so the idea is it doesn't matter if you have excuses or not. If you're not at school, it's really challenging. And so it's not a punishment necessarily, it's what can we do to support these students? Okay, so Ohio Materials Matters, I think a lot of people don't have I see some cameras. Okay, who has looked at Ed Reports or Ohio Materials Matters? You can either raise your hand. Yes, I see some hands raised. Okay, Ohio Materials Matters runs through Ed Reports. I love this because this is looking at these core curricular issues. And so there are countless schools who have curriculums that are in the red on Ed Reports or Ohio Materials Matters. So if it's in the red, that's concerning to me, right? I'm kind of questioning. Now, the other thing that I love with Ed Reports are the rubrics, the grading rubrics. So for example, I have a son in 2nd grade. I also have a daughter who's a freshman and a son who's a junior. And so in my district that my kids are at, they're doing a literacy adoption. I am so impressed with the curriculum director. He has done all this research, has used Ed Reports, has done book studies with the teachers. And I'm thinking, this is great. So then I thought to myself, my daughter has been a little bit complaining about math. And I remember hearing that at the high school, they did a math adoption. And I said, well, this curriculum director, like, he knows his stuff. I'm wondering what he got from math. And so I found out that they got this math curriculum. It's rated green on Ed Reports. It's phenomenal. And so I'm like, let me look at it. I'm curious. And so I asked my daughter, I say, hey, Natalie, can I see your math book? She goes, math book? We don't get math books. I'm like, wait, what? You don't have a math book? No, we get packets. You get packets? And she said, oh, wait, we do have a math book, but we only have gotten it out once. And that's when somebody came to observe our classroom. I said, what? So can I see one of your packets? So she gives me her packet. She is being taught with a teacher paid teachers math curriculum. So here you have this district who has spent all this time and money getting this great math curriculum, and they are using, the math teacher is using a teacher paid teachers curriculum. So one of the most popular teacher paid teachers curriculums that I've seen in reading, I see a lot of teachers love Rooted in Reading. That's one that I heard about. My son was even getting that. I took the Ohio Materials Matter, this Ed Reports rubric, and used it to look at Rooted in Reading. It is horrifying. So even if you have the best materials, that doesn't mean that your teachers are using them. So I think it's really important to think about this when we're looking at this and to what extent. So also, Ohio's Plan to Raise Literacy, the Dyslexia Guidebook, there is phenomenal information in those two different things. So encourage you to look there. We cannot intervene our way out of a tier 1 problem. So please look there. And as a side note, even if you are at that 80% or higher for that core, it doesn't mean that you're kind of totally fine, no problems. So for example, I've seen in some districts, they tend to be a lot wealthier districts, that they might be well over this 80% or higher mark for kind of this tier 1 core. And they also have a special education disproportionality issue, where they are over-identifying students of color as having specific learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities. That, in my mind, is still a core problem. So take a look at that. Okay, so we looked at that core data. So when we're on that, I view this this is that tier 1 core of this on track by grade level. And this details of measure, this is really intervention. How effective is our intervention? Because note, this details of measure is only looking at the students who scored off track on that diagnostic. So of those students who scored off track on the diagnostic, how many were able to get on track? So this is looking at that intervention. So year 1 would really be reflective of this kindergarten intervention. This is 1st grade intervention, 2nd grade intervention, and this is 3rd grade intervention. So this gives you an idea of what's happening. Now, please take these percentages with a grain of salt. If you have a large population, then you can probably count on these percentages. But let's say that I only had 5 students or 4 students in this year 2. That percentage could look, we could unintentionally think that we're really not doing well based on a percentage, or we're doing phenomenal. It just, again, I just think you should always look at numbers, always double check things when you're looking at this. So for this intervention, I recommend looking at those same 3 things. And then I also, if you haven't seen the RIMP intervention code and RIMP intervention videos, it's a wealth of information, those RIMP intervention videos. It's great. And I have a good friend. She's a school psychologist in a district. And this whole time she was thinking that these students were getting some OG or Gillingham interventions. And so she felt, I mean, that's what she was told. And when I hear OG, sometimes I laugh because I'm like, what do you mean by OG? Because I've been in, I've worked in a district. OG can look very different to different people at different times. And so it turns out that in this intervention, even though they said they were getting OG, the OG teacher was like, oh, but I really don't use any of the OG. Like, I really only use some of the materials. I just bring in my own things. I don't really follow the OG routine. So again, that's something to be aware of when you're looking at this. Also, quick aside, there are a few interventions that when you're looking at those RIMP codes, specifically say are not aligned with Ohio's plan to raise literacy. There are countless districts who still use those RIMP codes, even though they say they're not aligned with Ohio's plan to raise literacy. So, I kind of would look into that and say, why are we doing something that's not aligned with Ohio's plan to raise literacy? What's happening? With this, and I guess I forgot to cover this in that improving K-3 literacy measure, what you might have heard me not say was anything about RIMP deductions. That's because there are no more RIMP deductions. RIMPs are not part of this measure at all in terms of counting for or against you. They are still required by law. And I encourage you to, you need to do that. It's very helpful. But note that there are no more RIMP deductions in any of this. Okay, so Carol, I'm going to get back to your question and say that you see that year 2, we scored 100% off track. This must be your COVID, and what's ODU doing to recognize this? Before I jumped to anything about whether it was something that has happened. If anything doesn't look right or seem right based on what you know about your district, check your EMIS reporting. I cannot tell you how many districts I have seen with EMIS errors on this measure. So many. Whenever I see something that has 100% on track or 100% off track, the very first thing I see and look is this an EMIS reporting error? Because if the data isn't reported correctly, it does no good to analyze it. So in terms of Carol, before thinking about, okay, is this because of COVID? Is this something else? I would look into this as in the Secure Data Center, and our team, if you email us, we can help you on that, but say, is this something where it wasn't reported? Because if it's not reported, then it's considered 100% off track. So that kind of is a big red flag to be like, everything I covered, you can just go out the window if you have EMIS reporting errors. And yeah, that's all I can say. Please, please, please talk to your EMIS people, the ITCs. It is critical. And then the last thing is connecting early literacy to overall achievement. So early literacy, it's some people think, oh, it's just a K-3 thing. No, this connects to everything. It connects to this overall achievement. It connects to how they're going to do in the future. This is very, very important. And so one thing that I've seen, and I want to talk about this because it can be a little bit controversial, is that, what I talked about here is that there's a few different things in terms of what we can spend more time on versus what we spend time on that may not be the most effective. So if you're thinking about now what should I do? One thing is that it is helpful to look at these proficiency trends overall, from like overall grade level and subjects. That's very, very helpful. So what we just looked at in terms of overall proficiency or interventions from that grade level, that is great to do. Spend more time on these Ohio Material Matters, these RIMP intervention codes, attendance works. If you haven't looked at Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center and the resources they have, please do. Oh my gosh, I love that center. So now, sure, I hear an echo. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about spend less time on. So one of the things that I know teachers spend a lot of time on and districts spend a lot of time on is that, and this doesn't necessarily happen in this K-3, although it does happen in 3rd grade, is that there's a lot of time and effort spent on the question type, on item level analysis for ELA. And it says, okay, if they get a main idea, main idea question wrong, we need to spend more time on main idea. I started thinking about this when looking at the science of reading and this equation, and I'm thinking, okay, where does that fall in? Like, where is main idea in the simple view of reading? I'm a little bit confused. So if you haven't yet read this article, this will be posted. I encourage you to take a look at Timothy Shanahan's article, How and How Not to Prepare Students for the New Tests. He has a couple blog posts as well, but he's one of the people who made these standards, these Common Core standards that are essentially most of the Ohio standards now. And from somebody who really worked on the standards, he's saying, do not focus on question types. He details why and all of the problems that can happen. He says, instead, focus on these 5 steps that can make students sophisticated and powerful readers. So Heather Hill is from Harvard, and she just came out with a study, and it's looking at studying, the title is, does studying student data really raise test scores? And that's a little bit misleading in the title, but what she says is that really focusing on the problem has likely distracted us from focusing on the solution. And so details how a lot of this focus on these question types in deep analysis actually doesn't show any benefit. So when we're looking at spend less time on versus spend more time on, I encourage you to really look at this that has really shown to help improve. What are these practices that we can do to improve? And what data do we have that can really help us make some differences? This formative assessment data. So again, think best instructional practices, effective interventions, and ways to get all students into complex texts. And this is just kind of overall questions that I think can be very helpful for teams. And what does the data say in terms of what's worked so far, bright spots? Melissa, I'm going to talk in terms of what you should do, or I don't want to say what you should do or shouldn't do. When I hear, hey, should we be retesting them if they didn't score a 700? I think the part of me is thinking, well, what's the reason? What's the reason that you're wanting them to score a 700? Is it just for your report card? Or are you saying, hey, if a student isn't scoring 700, do they still have some challenges with reading? If so, what supports do I need to provide them? What's going to change? What are those intensive interventions they might be getting in the summer to even take that test? What's happening? What's going on? I kind of really am hesitant to say to do or not do something. This is something that you really need to think about. What is the best? What's going on? And exemptions for students that are alternatively assessed. That's a great question. Can you clarify in terms of what you mean by exemptions for students that are alternatively assessed? Melissa, I'm not sure if you can come off mute or type in the
Yeah.
chat box. I can't hear anything. Okay, well, if you want, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what you mean in terms of exemptions for students who are alternatively assessed. I can tell you that when we are, sorry, what was I gonna say? That when we are doing, I'm gonna go back here really quick if I can. Let's see here. So let me see if I can go back to that PowerPoint. Now it's all the way over here. One moment, sorry guys.
Rachel, while you're looking at that, I had pulled up an intermediate grade card. There was a question about 3rd through 5th grade and how that might look.
Yes.
It looks like all 3 components are included, and the improving K3 literacy component contains only that year 4 cohort, which is students who were assessed in the fall of their 3rd grade year compared to who moved on track after they took the state assessment.
Thank you so much. I was wondering about that because they do have that 3rd grade. So I'm so glad you said that. Thank you for clarifying that. I very much appreciate that.
No problem.
So for students who take the alternative assessment, they are, first of all, I want to say that in terms of this improving K3 literacy measure, all students really should be included in this. I think that it can be incredibly hard to just jump to decide that somebody at a very young age is going to take, that alternate assessment. And even if they are, there is a very big push that all students need to be part of this universal screening process. The one thing where students who are taking the alternate assessment are not considered is this 3rd grade scoring proficient on the reading segment. That is because there is no specific separate reading segment on the alternate assessment, and we can't kind of equate with a reading score of 50 or higher. So know that students who are taking the alternate assessment are not included in this proficiency in 3rd grade reading. They are included in this, and they really should be, in terms of, hey, are we looking at students kind of making sure that we're included all students in this improving K3. So Trisha, yeah, I think it's, so 50%, I mean, it's close to 50%, it's 40% of the component, but not this component. Note that this proficiency, this is the reading score of 50 or higher. So this isn't the 700. So this is the score of 50 or higher is at 40% of the component. Whether they get a 700 or higher, that's one little part of this improving K3 literacy, which is worth 25% of the component. So I want to clarify that. This is not 700, this is 50, a reading score of 50 or higher. Does that help a little bit? Okay. And so also, like, in terms of that 700 or higher, just to make sure that everyone, this is only looking at year 4. So it really is not a large part. It's like 25, one tiny part of 25%. So I guess in my mind, It's hard because I'm thinking, I know that districts and teachers really, really, really care about the report card. I think having worked with it for so long and worked in the districts, I wish that it's almost, let's not necessarily worry so much about the report card, but let's really focus on what these students need. And then, the report card is just really kind of, okay, that's there, let's look at it, but what are we going to do to support these students moving forward? So I want to open it up for any questions. I know I went pretty quickly, so any other questions? Okay, and I will make sure in a moment to put our there's a general email for the email to email our office. And if there are any questions, I love the data team that I work with. They are phenomenal in terms of helping and assisting in any way, and they are incredibly they will get back to you within 24 hours. I can say that if you email me, I cannot promise that. Right now, there's so much on my plate. So if you want a quick response about anything report card related, that email that I just put in the email box, you will get a great answer and very prompt. So I just wanted to make sure you all had that. Well, I love being here today and thank you so much. Yes, I'll make sure to be sending this PowerPoint to Debbie, and so she can put that in the Padlet.
Thank you, Rachel. I know you are incredibly busy, and for you taking time to meet with us for this hour, we really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Okay, have a great day.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other comments for the good of the order about the presentation that Rachel gave? Did you find it helpful and did it clarify some things for you? Are these things that you're looking for and appreciating, or want to make sure that we're going in the right direction of things that you're wanting?
I'll chime in real quick. I thought that was good, especially the piece about the reading portion proficiency, not the overall, because I've been to report card trainings this year, and I don't believe that was ever clarified or mentioned. So that it's always good to hear from different people, because sometimes you learn different things. So
one of the things I love about Rachel is that I am not a data geek. And so she puts it in terms I can understand and tells kind of a story, and it connects the dots for me. So I really appreciate her approach to how she presents data.
Yeah, I agree, Debbie. Even doing something as simple as pointing out that the diagnostic data for the current year would be a tier 1 gauge, and the the year 1, 2, 3, and 4 would be something to use to measure how impactful our interventions are being. Just that context I think can be very powerful.
What was impactful for me, I always forget to put this little microphone down, was the chronic absenteeism. I mean, and just thinking to look at that as a dimension to all of this.
Yeah, that is so true. And the difference in the scores, like you may be seeing, a nice percentage when you're looking at your overall building, but when you're kind of going down and really looking at individual students or groups of students, like, wow, we've got this one group that seems to be the whole of our score, and they're missing multiple days of school. I also like the part that she gave, that it doesn't matter if they're excused or not. Like
Mhm.
absent is absent. All right. So I'm going to go on. In your Padlet, we're going to talk about the certification process. And I put a couple of documents into our Padlet. These are in draft form, but this has been what some literacy people across the state have been working on as guidance documents as you're going through the certification process. And hopefully that's going to give you some help, because right now you're just putting your plans together. But also keeping in mind is that this certification process is not quick. Okay, it takes a long time because there is a component of this where they're working with children. And so training such as letters, that will meet the 18-hour requirement that right now K1 teachers have to have completed the 18 hours in whatever format you're choosing. Whether you're choosing to do something like letters, whether you're doing the 18 hours that was is free through ODE that was created by Middle Tennessee, and there's other options as well. It doesn't matter, but all K1 teachers have to have that completed by the start of the school year next year. So it's going to vary by different dates per district as well. And Nick, I'm wondering if you can share, there was some comments that came up about what do we do with that teacher that gets hired in August or late July? Like what happens with them with this requirement?
So I share a space with somebody who works in this whole dyslexia legislation and what it means for ODE. And she told me that if a teacher is hired after the start of a school year, they have 1 calendar year to complete those requirements from their date of hire.
So that may be helpful with you going forward and whatever your plan is. So if you did, for example, if you did something like letters, how are you going to get that training to new hires? Okay, so they'll have a full year, but do you have a plan in place for how that's going to happen?
Hey, Debbie, it's Angie. Nick, can you clarify that you said for teachers hired after the school year, but we're actually going to be hiring teachers in the summer, which is before the start of the school year, but do they still get that year?
So I don't want to give you false information. I can forward that question because it was specifically what happened. I was forwarding another question. What happens if, we've got to hire somebody in September after we've started? So I will get clarification on that, Angie, and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me put that a little bit in context. We have nothing official yet. What they're finding is that there were things they did not think about when they put this into place. And so as those things are kind of bubbling to the surface, they are addressing them. That is one thing that they are considering, is giving an entire year, such as all of our K1 teachers had this year. But we have not got any official notice yet. So I want to make sure that we're really clear on that, but that is one consideration.
Debbie, this is Dorothy. I contacted the dyslexia email and asked those questions, and the guidance I got, like the question about if they're hired in the summer, it said they should aim to complete the PD as close to the legislative timeline as soon as practically possible. So that's the response I received. Also, what's a little odd is I said, well, going down the road, what if, all these deadlines have passed? And unfortunately, there's nothing written in the law that says people 3-4 years down the road have to get this training. it would be more of a district decision. So that's kind of sad, you know, but I'm hoping districts will continue to get training to their teachers. But yep, I'm looking at my email right now and it says they should aim to complete it as close to the legislative timeline as possible. So.
Thank you, Dorothy. That
You're
makes sense to me, you know, something as extensive as letters, that's not a quick process. Okay, that's a very long process to get that training. And I would even say the 18 hours that ODE put out, as I'm going through those myself, that it takes longer than 18 hours to go through those as well. And I'm thinking as a brand new teacher, when would I want them to start that, as overwhelming as it is to be a new teacher? Like, is it going to go in one ear and out the other, because they're learning everything? And what supports do we have in place for those brand new teachers? Any other comments around that? Okay, if you pull up those guidance documents and take a look at those. And keep in mind too, that these are in draft form and have not been finalized yet, but I just felt like I'm getting so many questions about the certification process that I thought I would go ahead and share some of these things so that you can start working on it. So I thought this planning tool was nice, and it provides some guidance about, you know, identifying, you know, who is going to be the person, things that you should maybe consider as you're choosing who is going to do this and what is this going to look like, and establishing what process you're going to follow, because there's many avenues that you can follow to have people certified. We have not received any dates as well. I mean, the only thing it has said for this year is that you need to put a plan in place. So what is your plan? I will share some of the feedback, and some of you can jump in if you're aware that some of these avenues that people need to go through to achieve certification, what they're finding is they're filling up and there isn't room for people. They only take so many people in each cohort and they're filling up. So that is something to be considering as you're putting this plan together, as to, you know, what can they even get into at this point. Anybody want to speak to the process that you're kind of thinking about, that we could share some ideas about your certification process? And keep in mind that something like letters does not meet this criteria. It will meet the 18 hours, but the practicum, the bridge to practice that's embedded into letters, is not rigorous enough to meet this certification process, because they're required to work with kids for a substantial amount of time on the practicum portion of it.
Debbie,
Hey,
I know I emailed you earlier about all of this because our principal and our curriculum director were, you know, we're in the process of thinking this. And originally we were hoping that our county person, our ESC person, was going to like be our lead person on that. And now they're finding out that they cannot be, because they do not service students 5 days a week. And so we're kind of wondering how our schools, small schools, we're a small school, how are they handling that? Are they partnering it with, you know, another job title? And you know, in my mind, how can you service students 5 days a week and also be this person that is covering and doing all of this? So we were hoping that maybe our team, our discussion can offer some insight on what other small schools are doing, if you're hearing it at all, or maybe people are not even ready to make that determination yet.
I'll just speak to the Northwest Ohio. Again, I was newly hired this year as a literacy consultant, so I'm learning, but to help districts with all this dyslexia legislation, I'm I'm kind of taking the lead from them because unfortunately, when you have 23 districts that you're serving, they kind of all go in different directions. So I had one district that kind of picked up on the IMSI, the Institute for Multisensory Education, their literacy certification process. And so because we had that interest, I know a lot of my districts, they're starting with that. They're using it as their tier 1 and getting everyone trained in it, but then they're choosing their certain people. Even in small districts, it's your title teachers or maybe some of your intervention specialists that will be able to, you know, go on and do the practicum to get certified. So that's what we're doing here. So I, as an ESC, again, I was hired and they were thinking, oh, I'm going to be the structured literacy certified person. Well, doesn't make sense for me to be that structured literacy certified person because I'm not working with the kids. So as in my role, I shift it and I'm just I'm, you know, hosting these professional development. So to get people trained and districts are sending them and then picking, if they're using it for tier 1, they might be sending all of their teachers, or they're sending those that they have decided, like their title teachers or some intervention specialists that they've chosen in the district to get this training, who then will go on to get the practicum. And you're right, Debbie, it's filling up. So there, you know, a lot of these programs though know that, and there's different things you can do to kind of pause or do some things until you're able to get into the practicums. So that's from Northwest Ohio, ESC.
I can speak to what Sylvania Schools is doing, if that helps for the certification. We had a cohort of our students, of our reading intervention teachers, about 9 of them go through Wilson Level 1, which involves the practicum. So from the very beginning, we knew how rigorous it was going to be because you have to make sure that the student, your case study student, meets a set of criteria to even to go through the practicum. So a lot of it was working with our school psychs, our special education to find a case study student. The case study student then has to be approved by Wilson Language. And then we had to talk to our union to talk about how do we get these teachers to then meet with their case study student. Some of the reading people had students in their buildings, but some did not because they didn't meet the criteria. So then we worked it out with them with a memo that we would pay them to tutor and do their case study outside of school hours, because they would have to do it after school or in the morning, and then make a contract with the parent that they would come to the school, or the teacher would travel to them to complete it. And it's been it's been a lot because it's really hard doing your day job. And if you have a Wilson student that met the case study requirements that you served, that was a bonus, but that was very few. So it's been a challenge, but we're getting through it. And it was something that we had to meet and come together, work with parents, work with our union at the beginning of the school year to lay the process out to see who would be eligible to make this happen and who wouldn't be.
That sounds very overwhelming, and it doesn't obviously sound like you can achieve any of this in a quick semester or a course, or
not. It's a year-long practicum. So we started the work on this last May, obviously because we had ESSER funding to do it, and so that's what we did, and it's a few people, only our reading people.
Is that a year-long practicum through Wilson?
Through Wilson Language, yep. We started it last May. They had a 3-day overview course. They had to pick their student, case study, get parents. This was all started, completed in August. Then we started the process. They started their lessons in September, and these lessons get observed. They're all video recorded. They have to get observed. They have to pass certain. So it's a big deal. It's kind of like the way I explain it to our union and to our principals. It's like student teaching with our teachers, a student teaching experience. But a lot of the times we have to contractually meet with families, and because they were not either at the school, they would have to come in the morning or after school if they weren't part of their reading group, because these students have to meet a certain criteria, and the lessons that you did have to be certain minutes. So there were so much rules and regulations. This is not an easy process. I just think that, you know, I'm hoping that the state gives more funding and time, because to see this through, and this was hard with just the small amount of reading teachers who have more flexibility in the schedule. I don't know how a classroom teacher could complete that.
So Melissa, we started with Wilson as well in Bowling Green. And I have 5 teachers that just finished up their certification. You are right, it is hard. We did reading specialist and intervention teachers, and it was, you know, whoever wanted to do it. But what we're finding is Wilson is great, but it teaches a program. So it teaches you how to follow a script, but it doesn't really teach all of the nuances of being able to respond to like a student specific need. So we are actually, I have a teacher who is going to, she's just been accepted to NIHouse, which I think is about the same cost as Wilson, but it teaches like the teacher how to respond to the kid no matter what program you're using, which I think in the long run might be more beneficial to our students and teachers. But anyways, check out NIHouse if you guys are looking for something. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to NIHouse. That's a company that was started by Tracy Whedon. You've probably seen her on the circuit. She speaks at all the major conferences, but also Rebecca Tolson, who was on Ohio's committee, dyslexia committee from the get-go, also works for NIHouse. And I've heard Rebecca speak several times, and she, before she now speaks all over, but when she was actually working with kids, she was talking about the training that she received and how long it took her as a professional to learn how to work with the really tough kids. Like she felt like that was a learning curve for her, is to figure out those that are on the far right side of the spectrum of dyslexia, where it's a very complicated need, that was not a quick learn for her. And it's not going to be through a program. It's going to be through the knowledge of how kids learn to read, and then, you know, practice those strategies that have been proven to be effective. So I believe Angie is absolutely spot on with that one as well.
And they do. So they do teach, they do have a curriculum. They use basic language. And then they're renaming one, Debbie, and I don't remember. It's like a newer product that they're putting out too. So your teachers do come away with knowing how to use, you know, a scope and sequence and their materials. So it isn't like you're just left floundering, kind of like, you know, OG used to be, where you've got one little book and it was like, God bless, good luck. So, I mean, it is better structured than that, but yeah, I know it might be shocking, but I'm kind of shifting my thinking on Wilson, because what we're finding is, you know, sometimes Wilson's not enough for kids. And that's because I don't know that Wilson really prepares the teachers to be able to be responsive to the individual needs.
I mean, we at Sylvania Schools have, when I got here, we'll have foundations, and they were already using Just Words, our intervention, throughout the middle school. So they wanted something aligned to what they were already doing. So I wouldn't be able to like really assess that until we were all done, and be able to give you better information and better data from what our specialists and interventionists and our reading people are seeing, because that's a really good point. It is program, so but like I said, they've already they have a teaching method that they're using, and they like the scope, they like the script. So that's all I can tell you about that. But once we're all said and done, I can definitely share out what the teachers report on.
Melissa, we were in the exact same boat in Bowling Green. So, I mean, that's why we went with Wilson initially as well. And we also have some teachers that are trained in just words. We're just, I guess maybe we're just a little bit further along, but it's not a bad thing. It's just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it's a good point to say that when we're looking at assessing our students, if there's skill deficiencies, then what would be the better strategy to have everything and not just a one system, program based, I guess. I get that.
Hey, Angie, this is Lori. I just had a quick question about the candidacy of the students that are being worked with. Melissa had mentioned that there were like specific criteria for choosing students in the programming or for the certification. What about with this new program? Is there the same?
With NIHouse,
Yeah.
I think you actually have to work with 3 students, I believe. I just got all of the final information. So you have to work with more than just one student. So it's structured a little bit differently than Wilson. For Wilson, they have to have an 80 IQ. Their assessment scores have to fall into certain ranges. And I can agree with Melissa. It was tough to find the kids during that training year because they have to really align, because you have to get them to 4.2 in their lessons. And if you can't get there, but after that first year, it's a little more reasonable to get kids into Wilson. So NIHouse, I don't know all of the criteria for choosing a kid yet, but I'll find that out. I'm sure there's criteria.
I just
Angie,
wonder if there's
you may have
criteria on those 3.
I think someone on here might have just gotten accepted to NIHouse. So I don't know if someone else might know how they choose kids more than I would.
Angie, how long is their program? How long is it going to take your teachers to get through certification? Is it a year?
No, I think it's 2.
2?
But I mean, my teacher came to me wanting to do this. So that's why we're kind of going to give this a go. But you can also just take classes. So that's the other thing that's nice about NIHouse. You don't have to go through that certification. You could just, they offer different classes and sessions. So just if you had a gen ed teacher who was interested in learning more about one of the areas that they offer, you can just do classes as well.
Lindsay, I see your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I can speak to a little bit about what we're doing here at Genoa. We're a very small rural school with 0 money. So we were lucky enough that a few years ago, the Ottawa County Community Foundation had a generous donation from a family that they earmarked specifically for dyslexia. And the stars just aligned with the law and all the requirements that were coming. And so through the Ottawa County Community Foundation, and I'm not really sure how they got partnered with the teacher we are going through. Her name is Kara Lee, and she works for, her company is called Horton Educational Services. And she does CELP training, so the Certified Academic Language Practitioner training. And a few years ago, we had 3 teachers here who went through the initial CELP coursework with her. And it was 2 of our special ed teachers and then 1 of our reading teachers. All 3 have stayed with Horton Educational Services and are now in the process of doing their advanced CELP and starting the process to be instructors of CELP. And so the downside of this was because these are so in demand right now, all but 1 have left our district. 1 has relocated in Southern Ohio, and the other one is Ashley Delch. She's actually my sister, but she's at Bellevue Schools now. So she's moved there, and then we still have our Lauren Schober is the one at our school. So we have gone back to the Ottawa County Community Foundation and asked for more money, and we were lucky enough to get it. So myself and one of our intervention specialists are just starting our cohort for KELP, and one of our other titles started it last year. So by the end, our whole reading team will have KELP by the end of next year, and then Lauren may have advanced KELP, and she'll be partially through her iKELP there. So I can share Horton Educational Services information. I think it sounds a lot like Wilson in terms of it's a very demanding process. We have 50 instructional hours in the classroom and homework assignments in terms of like we're reading books and doing, you know, reflections on that. We have to have 5 recorded observations, and we have to accumulate 60 practicum hours with a student. And similar to what they were saying about Wilson, there are requirements for the student we're working with in terms of, I don't know what all the requirements are because I'm not at that part yet where we're selecting our student, but I know they've made it clear already that the goal of the student is that it needs to be somebody that's helping you learn. Like this is for you, this is your practicum, so you can cover as much of the scope and sequence as possible and, you know, get that experience. And so, like, I know one thing for us was like a student with attention.
I'm sure
Sorry, there's my announcement. We had to do a recess today due to the rain outside. Thank you. Like a student with an attention issue is not a candidate, because that's going to slow down the progress of you getting through all of the skills they want you to be able to teach and things. So it's expensive. Our cost was $3,800 per trainee. And then you have to pay $180 exam fee to take your exam to become a KELP. And then there's a, you have to keep up your annual membership through ALTA, the Academic Language Therapy Association. I think that's like around $100 a year, and a certain number of professional development credits you have to renew with each year as well. So it's a lot. And unfortunately, I think we've sucked the well dry with the Ottawa County Community Foundation. So this is good for now. We feel like we're probably in a pretty good place as a small district to have this many people trained, but I have no idea how we're going to sustain this down the road. And the hope is with Lauren being here and getting her iKELP, then she would be able to train in-house for us, if that would be part of her job description at that point. So that's kind of where we are.
Carol?
Lindsay, I'm glad that you brought up the finance part of this. It's been a question that I've had to my administrators, like how are districts going to compensate the individuals for going through all this training? You know, even if a district is fortunate enough to say, yes, we can cover this Orton Gillingham cost of, you know, $2,600, the process that it takes, or the fact that in the end they are certified, how are we going to compensate those people for that additional job duty or that additional learning? If you're certified, but that, like on our pay scale, that does nothing. You know, we pay you by your degree, so that's not a degree. Or, you know, I already have my master's degree. Am I going to get another master's degree from St. Joseph University in this dyslexia law certification? So how do we compensate all of these people that are going through all this? You know, that is, and it feels like very wrong to even bring that up, because it sounds like, you know, obviously we're in education for a reason. We're obviously in education or in reading. We're part of this team. We're trying to learn. But at the end of the day, the state is asking all of these extra things that people should be compensated somehow in some capacity. Even if you just get through the training, that additional whatever, it should, and I don't think that's ever been, they just look at me like, I don't know. So
I mean, we've had some of those conversations just in terms of like, our 3 people who got trained, we lost all but 1 in 1 school year because there were bigger opportunities with better pay, better just resources available to them in these other districts and positions where they could do more with their training. And like, we don't want that to keep happening, obviously. I know one of our neighboring districts has a teacher who was able to take advantage of this grant too, and that district paid for hers entirely and gave her a stipend to compensate her for the time and effort she was putting into doing it. Our district didn't do any of that. Like, I think our total, what we got from the Ottawa County Community Foundation was like $100 short of the total for me and the other teacher who are doing it now. And our district did kick in the 100 extra instead of making us pay the 50, but I mean 50 each, but we don't like, I'm with you, like, I have a master's degree. I'm as far right as I can go in education right now. Like, I'm not even probably going to take this for credits because it gets me nothing. I'm going to pay for credits that don't even amount to anything for me. So I'm, like you said, we do it because it's what we want to do and we want to make the impact and it's what we're being asked to do, but it is a disadvantage, I feel like, for all of us doing it, that there's no incentive outside of just our intrinsic motivation to do the right thing, you know? So yeah, I don't know how we solve that.
I think it's probably one of those things that the state hasn't even considered, that, you know, we all want better for our students. We all do, and we would do anything for them. But this is a job on top of a job right now, and we don't have answers, and it's hard to navigate that pathway. So I felt a little nervous about even bringing that up in this platform, but I feel like maybe other people feel the same way, and I was just interested in maybe some thoughts, but thank you.
I'm Christine Hobus at Allen County ESC. And does the state have any promise type guarantee that once teachers are through what this certification is, be it, I don't know, Wilson or wherever you go, that it's going to be good for a while? Or are they gonna, I mean, I can't be putting teachers through this and then, oh, did we say that certificate? No, we meant go do this whole other also thing. And I mean, when does it end? Or how long does it count for? Am I making any sense? I need some kind of guarantee that this is going to be good for a while if they're going to go through this exactly and do this. Don't backtrack and change your mind later, state. Am I making sense?
I can't answer a lot of those questions for you, but I do think, the certification process, you would have to follow the guidelines through whatever program you selected to go through to maintain that certification. That's going to be different, I would assume, per program. I don't know them all well enough to speak intelligently to them. I am certainly hopeful that since this is in legislation, that it continues to go forward. But I also recognize the challenges that this is bringing to districts who want to do the right thing, but there is the financial issue. And I think Carol brings up a very good point about compensation for our people. I just wonder how long we keep asking educators to do these kinds of things without being adequately compensated. And of course, that's a conversation for people that are above me, way above me. But I'm in your camp, Carol, is how do we compensate these professionals who are sacrificing time with their families and they are doing their regular job and then doing this on the side? I don't have any answers for that.
Yeah, because a lot of the programs, if you go through the Center for Effective Reading Instruction, you get that certificate. It's good you can get it for a year or 3 years. And there's, just like anything, you have to have so much PD. Now, the good thing maybe that's where I'm looking at now down the road, offering PD that can count towards renewal of that structured literacy certificate. It has to go with the knowledge and practice standards, but I think it's doable. I've been checking into that as an ESC then down the road here in a few years when we have all these teachers with these certificates and they need 10 contact hours a year to renew it. I want to make sure that we can support them in getting them that training as locally as possible, or have resources for them to get it. The good part is those hours can also count towards your teaching license renewal as well, as part of that 180 hours, but coordinating that for them as well.
Well, and when Debbie said maintaining the certification, that kind of implies it's going to be an ongoing, continuous thing. So it's not, let's get this certification and then, take that back to your school, but it's going to be ongoing, which feels even more intimidating and overwhelming.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
has-
I have a question, Betty, and others.
I'm
This
sorry,
is
go ahead,
Stephanie. Just a question for you and others. So, yeah, there's figuring out who has it, and we have somebody who's working on it, but that person is not current. She's an instructional coach. So I heard some comments about they have to be working directly with the students. So that's making me question what we're doing. But in the end, what is exactly the role of this person? If they are to serve on district teams that are determining screeners and markers, but how can they do all that when they're still supposed to be teaching all day? Those kids that are identified might not necessarily end up in their classrooms. If you've got, kids across the district that do have markers or tendencies, which we still don't have defined. I don't know what the role of the person is when you choose this person to do that. Is it just, so I've got an expert in the building?
Well, I do think that there's some autonomy for districts on that as to what role you would play. And I would say that that's a tough one, because when you have someone with that level of knowledge, we want them to have opportunities to share it. And so when they can work directly with teachers, now they're not just touching maybe the 6 kids or 4 kids that might be in a group that they're instructing, but now through helping a colleague in a classroom, they're now touching the lives of all the kids in the building. So how do we balance that you're going to work with children for part of your day, and maybe it's only a group a day, but the rest of the time you're working with teachers, modeling for them, helping them puzzle through problems. Like, I've got this group of kids, I can't get them to move. Can you come in and let's look at the data together? Let's look at some instructional routines. They're going to be a pretty valuable resource to the other teachers within your buildings.
And that in itself, I mean, I like that model, maybe they do a group a day, but then you're also then increasing the resources needed in building. If I were to take one of my title teachers per building and say, you're going to teach one group of title in this building and the rest of the day, you're going to kind of be the expert. I need another title teacher to teach the kids that she's no longer reaching.
Mhm.
So again, the resources that a district has to think about. I mean, we can complain about unfunded mandates, but it's definitely one of those. I mean,
It is. And that really makes it very, very dicey, which was not the original intent. When this whole thing started, it was supposed to be funded. And so, that's what kind of happened when it went through the wash, which is really unfortunate because it's created a ripple effect of difficulties that are standing in the way.
One thing just to piggyback on what you guys were just saying about, like, how do you balance the time these people can use with teachers and with students? One thing we started doing this year is that each of us on our reading team are taking 1 day a week without students. So our students are still getting serviced 4 days a week. And then we alternate the days, like one of my coworkers is Wednesday, mine is today. And so this day is set aside for collaboration and coaching and partnering with classroom teachers, or just, checking in on RIMPs, looking at data, like all those millions of things that we don't have time for if we're working with kids all day, every day. And it's been hugely helpful to classroom teachers. I feel like it's been very well received. It's our busiest day of the week. I feel like we run around like chickens with our heads cut off a little bit, but it's good. Like it's a good thing that's happening. But for us, we had those same concerns and felt like this would be a way to somewhat make it manageable. I mean, we always wish we had more time for that, but we are servicing the kids, but that might be something to consider as a way to kind of work it. And our admin has been very supportive of that and, you know, really saw the need for it. And so that made it so much easier to make happen in a successful way.
So then the kids you serve that you do 1 day a week, are those kids who only need 1 day a week of intervention? Like you've identified that they need a less?
No.
Or how does it get covered the rest of the week?
No, we service the kids 4 days a week. And we have 1 day for like collaboration with teachers and coaching and stuff. And it's kind of nice too, because like, you know, if we have 2 snow days, like we can kind of like push our collaboration back a week, and it helps. You know, there have been times where we've used some of our collaboration day time to like double dip a kid who really needed something extra, or they were on vacation for a week and they missed, you know, so we've been pretty flexible with the scheduling of it, but for the most part, 1 day a week, like for me, it's every Thursday. I don't see my students, I see teachers and work with our staff instead.
Well, this document that Debbie shared with us may have in there the 5-day requirement, but that's what I was told from our principal, that this person has to service students 5 days a week, but your method could work. You just have to get creative in your the scheduling. But for a district my size, I'm very small, it's just me. And so I'm really kind of perplexed on how I'm going to do all of it. And I don't know, and they're trying to decide if it is going to be me or should it be another person or partnered together. And I'm hoping there's some help here.
Yeah, and any, I guess, any questions you have, email that dyslexia site on ODE. They're really good about getting back with you pretty timely. I mean, anytime I have submitted a question, I've usually gotten a response within a very timely manner, you know, within a couple of days. That gives you more of an official answer, because I can only speak unofficially. And so they can speak more officially to get your questions answered, if there is an answer. I feel like that some of this, there really isn't. It isn't a one size fits all. It's going to look different when you have a very small district versus, you know, what does a Toledo Public do? You know, it's going to look really different, and then all the districts in between.
Can I ask a clarifying question? This must work with kids 5 days a week. Where is that coming from? Because in the guidance document under dyslexia, I don't see that anywhere. The dyslexia guidance document, unless I'm looking at an old one or something, but it does say when, like, it gives you kind of steps for thinking about your process, and it says identify and recruit certified educators. And one of it says in the identify and recruit area, it says prioritize candidates with certification for certain leadership positions. For example, special education coordinators, elementary principals, and literacy coaches. Well, those people wouldn't necessarily, I mean, right there, they're telling you to think about those kind of people as your people that are certified. But yet I'm hearing this 5 day a week thing. So I'm not sure where that's coming from.
I've never seen anything about the certified people having to work with kids 5 days a week. In my mind, though, as a principal, just coming out of being a principal, I was on the MTSS team and I was a part of that. But however, I want people with that advanced knowledge of how to work with kids to be working with kids. And so I want to get some of my key teachers or title teachers with that structured literacy certification, so they have that knowledge to work with kids. And yes, they may be a part of that MTSS team, along with myself as an administrator and other people, you know, in leadership roles. So that was my thinking. But no, I've never seen where, Carol, I'm not sure where you heard that person has to work with kids 5 days a week. I've just know, as I'm talking to districts now in this new role, I'm saying, think of those people who are going to work with those tier 2, tier 3 kiddos, because they're going to have that knowledge, but also can be part of your MTSS team, looking at data and helping teachers. So that's how I'm approaching it.
Okay, and I have not read that anywhere. It was just told to me by our curriculum person and my principal. So I don't know if they had heard that through a principal's meeting or a curriculum meeting or somewhere, but that's all I can share, or that's all I can speak on that. Because that was our original plan, was that the ESC person would be our person for multiple counties. And she was in the process of receiving or getting that certification or going through the process of that. And then all of a sudden they said, well, she's not even in our district 5 days a week and she doesn't service any students, so it cannot be her.
And I do know that we have several ESC colleagues who are going through certification, but again, that's a long process. Like, that's not going to be quick. But I do know that is happening. But how they're going to be used in districts, I can't speak to that. I don't know if any of our ESC colleagues can speak to that, as to if you've received any information about expectations for supporting districts once you have certification.
I think it goes to being difference as being a check mark on a box that you have someone that's structured literacy certified versus actually making a difference for kids in the classroom. Because again, like I said, that was where I was going to, but then we're getting to that practicum. Well, I don't work with kids in this role. Yes, I could probably find a child to agree to do a practicum with me, but then I'm done. Okay, you have districts that have multiple kids that need that intervention. I could maybe help one of my 23 districts or two if they shared me to actually work with kids. Or I could be just that person on the check box saying, yes, we, as part of our MTSS team, we have this ESC person who has the structured literacy certified. I mean, so I guess it depends on, how you want to use that person. And I've been structured literacy trained, and I can be an asset to my districts as far as helping with questions or coaching and all of that. But I'm still in that process deciding, do I go on to get certification? Because really the only thing that would do is then I would, have that knowledge or be working with kids. So, I think, again, it just depends on what districts want that person to do or be.
And Debbie, I would echo kind of what Dorothy just said. I'm going through the certification process right now. And I have been told that I can sit on schools teams, and I could be their structured literacy person on paper. But it's kind of like what Dorothy said, is that going to be an efficient use of that position for that school? Nothing in the guidance book, nothing in anything written in law says that a person has to work with kids. It's all should or could, or maybe. There's no must that a structured literacy certification person has to work with the students who are the most behind. It's a recommendation. It's a best practice. But for me, and servicing so many different schools and districts, we've talked with schools, I might be able to be at your school once a month. Is that really going to be the best use of this position for your school? This position should be someone that is looking at your data and is helping, coach your staff and is looking at all of your RIMPs and has a bigger pulse on, literacy at the school. And so I know that there is a camp at ODE that is telling schools to contact your ESC because they can be your person. I just don't think that is feasible with how many schools we service. But that being said, I do put myself out there. If you need help with choosing a curriculum, at aligning your MTSS system, at looking at screeners, sitting down and going over your data, I'd be more than happy to do those things. But to be your structured literacy person, I just don't think it is feasible with what ODE would like this person to be. But like Dorothy said, you know, we are working on ideas for PD for those people who are structured literacy. How can we keep that momentum going? You know, so like I said, I'm going through my certification through the Ames Institute, and I've loved the program. It really does help to spell out the MTSS process with literacy, what that should look like. It gives some really great resources that can be used with any curriculum that's out there. So it's not just one curriculum focused. Everything I've gotten, I could use with any curriculum that is out there. It's a great program for time. It's all online. So everything I'm doing is online. There's nothing face-to-face. And I have found it very beneficial with the role that I'm in. And I think anybody who goes through it would be a great asset to the schools that we work with. It's just going to be figuring out some of these questions. And I have emailed the dyslexia box with some of these questions, and whatever answers I get back, I'll add to that Padlet so that everybody can see those answers. Because I think sometimes these questions get asked, but it's by one person, and then we don't all hear what the answer is. So if I get any responses back, I will make sure to add those to the Padlet so that everybody can see those.
Thank you, Amy. Any other final thoughts? We're at the end of our time. I want to make sure I honor your time. I will be putting, it is not in there right now, but it will be in a few minutes. I'll be putting in my PowerPoint, and as soon as I receive Rachel's, I'll be putting that in as well. And the recording will go in. That takes a few days. But we should have that in there within a week or so. As far as the third grade reading guarantee, within the PowerPoint that I've created, I put on some of the big changes. There were three major ones. It was the kindergarten diagnostic date, children with special needs. There is a lot of clarification in this on the third grade reading guarantee. And of course, every year, you know, the promotion score changes for our third graders. And so I walked what it was in the previous document and what it is now is in bold and in red, which you probably already know all of that as well, but it's there for you if you need it. And then if you could do the reflection survey to help us plan for our final meeting in May, I would appreciate it. But thank you very much for the conversation today. I feel like it's very helpful to hear from each other and what we're all doing. We can get ideas from each other. We can ask questions. This is such a knowledgeable group. So thank you for being willing to share. Anything else for the good of the group? With that, finish your very hectic week and enjoy your weekend. Find some time to rest. Bye, everybody.